We firmly believe that in a world fraught with geo-economic and political uncertainties, it is not in our common interest to burden our economies with such tariffs.
The European Union and Canada are retaliating against President Trump's tariffs on steel and aluminum. The EU says it will impose counter tariffs on U.S. goods like whiskey and steel starting in April. Canada has already slapped retaliatory tariffs worth nearly $30 billion worth of U.S. goods. Gordon Sondland served as the U.S. ambassador to the EU during the first Trump administration. I spoke with him earlier this morning about what Trump is trying to achieve with these tariffs. Ambassador Sondland, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
President Trump, as you know, has imposed 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imported into the U.S. Canada retaliated. The EU has counter tariffs that are going to start in April. What is your response or your reaction so far to this trade war that the president has launched?
I think there's a bigger issue than the trade war itself. And the bigger issue is that the United States, for years, has mentioned, complained, pounded the table, whatever adverb you want to use, about various things that it deems to be a nuisance to America or unfair to America or downright hostile to America, depending on what the case may be, with the Europeans, in some cases with Canada. And the reaction is always, yes, 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 we'll take it under advisement. We're talking about it. We're working on it. And nothing happens. And I think what President Trump is trying to do with all of these relationships is create some immediate action by essentially, blowing things up in order to put them back together again. And it certainly has caused a lot of hair on fire. It's caused a lot of consternation. But the one thing it's doing is it's really getting people moving and sitting down and talking finally. And not only that, but taking action and taking immediate action, which is something our friends and colleagues are loath to do when they enjoy an advantage in a certain area.
I'll come back to that, but just to push further on how to understand this, what do you think the goal is then for the president in this, other than, I guess you're suggesting correcting unfairness that he perceives in the trade relationship, but what do you think is the goal?
I mean, I'm not sure that the goal is that big a deal at the end of the day. I think that the president certainly wants some adjustments made in the dairy issue, in the car issue, and in the defense spending issue. And these are things that have been talked about with Canada since Ronald Reagan. Every president has brought them up, and every president that's brought them up has been essentially gently patted on the head and said, yes, we're working on it. Trump is done with that. He wants things to change, and he wants them to change immediately.
I take your point, but some of what you're talking about, Canada has indicated it's not up for grabs, the supply management issue, the dairy and poultry. And then some of it, the steel and aluminum, is seeming to hurt the United States more, given how much the United States imports from us on that front. And we are not, unlike China, dumping steel into the United States. So help me understand the disconnect there between the things that could rightly be targeted and the things that are being targeted.
Well, when you say it's not up for grabs, when you mention dairy as an example, I think the administration views that as a very, very dismissive response. And I'm not speaking of you personally.
No, I have no position on it, yes.
Yeah, exactly. But of the Canadian government, everything is up for grabs. And if Canada wants to protect its farmers, then the United States is going to say, fine, we're going to protect our farmers. And by the way, you're spending about 1.4% of your GDP on defense. We're going to stop defending you until you spend more, because everything is a blank sheet of paper. You cannot have fair and multilateral trade by someone saying that something is not up for grabs. Everything is up for grabs. Everything.
Let's talk a little bit about the European Union. You were President Trump's ambassador there. The EU is now stands to lose 3.7 million tons of steel exports. How concerned are you about what this means for the EU's relationship with the United States? So I wonder whether, is this, again, about a course correction, or do you think that this could lead to a breakdown in relationships?
No, it's all about a course correction. But there's a difference between a course correction when you sit down at a bilateral meeting or a multilateral meeting and you have serious conversations and people, essentially, there's an American expression, rope-a-dope. People rope-a-dope you. They say, yes, that's very interesting. We'll take that under advisement. We're working on it. We're going to appoint a blue ribbon commission. And months and years go by and nothing changes. And President Trump has observed this phenomenon on a whole host of levels, whether it's defense spending, trade, or anything else, the border, et cetera. And he's taking advantage of a very, very narrow window that he has, which is about 2 years before our United States midterms. And he is bound and determined to put people on a schedule of looking at their watch, not at their calendar. And people are not accustomed to this type of speed, but they are all at the table and they are all talking. And I believe all of this is going to get worked out.
Negotiating is one thing, you're right, and at least people are talking, and the Canadians are at the table with Secretary Letnick and others. But the president's comments about annexation are very. Canada really deems them as quite inappropriate and quite frightening, frankly. Why would he bother to use that kind of language here? Is this, given that he wants a real negotiation, this rhetoric can't be helping that?
Well, look, he has his way of expressing himself. We've all seen it. It's been going on his entire life. If you look back at the early 80s, when he was first appearing in the media and making political comments, he spoke in much of the same way. That's part of his personality. Is he literally talking about annexing Canada and making your prime minister a governor? Of course not. And anyone who takes that seriously, should basically, re-examine their position. What he's really talking about ultimately is a much more seamless relationship between Canada and the U.S., particularly since the U.S. is providing a significant defense umbrella to Canada. And that could mean, joint passports. It could mean significant further economic ties than we currently have. It could mean no tariffs and no tariff barriers on anything between our two countries. That's the ultimate goal. I don't think his choice of words is particularly palatable to Canadians, and I understand that, but I understand where he's going as well.
Okay. Ambassador Sondland, always good to get your perspective. Really appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you.